So I'll call this meeting to order at 8 a.m. for the Longmont Housing Authority Advisory Board. Welcome everyone to this beautiful snowy Tuesday morning. Olivia, would you do roll call for us?
Sure. This morning we have Tom DeBee, Arlene Zortman, Jean Christopher, and Lauren Sully. We also have Harold Dominguez, Lisa Gallinar, Karen Roney, Kendra Daniels, and Polly Christensen.
Thank you very much. I'd like to welcome Lauren back too with the new baby girl. Welcome, welcome. Can everybody had a chance to review the minutes from our March 16th meeting? Are there any changes to that? I did notice one minor misspelling, which was on the, I believe, the second to last page in the vacancy age receivables report, second paragraph. Harold Dominguez is with a G instead of a Q.
Good catch. I didn't even catch that one.
Do I hear a motion? I think you're on mute, Jane.
Second.
So Jean made the motion, Arlene seconds. Ayes, please raise your hand.
I'm going to refrain from voting since I wasn't there last month.
Okay, all right. You abstain. Motion unanimously passes. So let's go to number 3 on the agenda. Public invited to be heard. Olivia, did you hear from anyone? No? Okay. So let's go on to number 4, new and old business. A, input on council retreat item regarding Longmont Housing Authority.
Yeah, that'll be me. So when we were talking about the retreat with the city council / housing authority board this year, they indicated that they wanted to spend the majority of the time on housing authority issues. They also indicated that they would like the advisory board to join them during that retreat. So with a couple of provisions, one, they wanted to do it in person and they wanted to do it unmasked. So potentially looking at someplace outdoors or close enough outdoors where we can run in if we have a rainstorm if needed. So the dates they're looking at is June. The dates we're looking at to propose to them is June 4th, 5th, 11th, or 12th. But we'll work with them on the specific dates. It's really going to depend on what happens with the masking orders within the next month and the rules, whether or not we change on May 16th. So we'll be providing you more information on the logistics and the date based on what we hear from the county in terms of whether or not we move into level clear on May 16th or not. What we wanted to talk to you all about is when I was working to put together the agenda in terms of how we move through housing authority issues. The way I started looking at it was, and we're still working on how it sits, but doing a, starting off with the presentation of housing needs assessment review. And that's just the study that we've done that says, here's what we need for housing in our community. Then moving into a discussion, and we don't want to talk a lot to you all. We want you all to really interact and talk through these things, but also providing the city council, the majority of the city council members, with some grounding on some of these issues, because beyond you and Councilmember Christensen and Councilmember Waters, very few of them have really dug into the housing authority items. And so what we wanted to do was start off with and we're still working on the order of this, but an overview of the Housing Choice Voucher Program, specifically talking about the vouchers and the partnerships that we have with private property owners. And I'm seeing a lot of acronyms in here. The project-based vouchers that are connected with developments, and then also looking at some of the ARPA impacts and some of the vouchers that will be available through that process. What we want to talk about in that section, or then we want to move into the properties and the types of properties that we have in the development. So go over the LIHTC properties for older adults, properties for families, the HUD 202 properties, which we have with the Hearthstone and Lodge, and then supportive service properties with supportive services for persons exiting homelessness that need more intense supportive services, then the different types of partnerships, tax exemptions, property management, tax credits, turnkey, and then how that combines with inclusionary housing, land donation, or partnership piece. And then going into a conversation on what we should be doing, AMI goals. What are the goals for vouchers? Do we increase the number of type of vouchers? What populations do we target? How should project-based vouchers impact or support project development? Getting into some development goals. What is our mission with respect to supportive housing? What number and type of units should we be shooting for? Do we give priority to LHA properties for city funding and inclusionary housing projects and other support? Talking a little bit about partnership goals. What level of partnership do we want to focus on? Money generation, unit ownership. And then get into a different opportunity section, really focusing on affordable assisted living or for sale housing development. So that's kind of what we put together as the talking points. Again, we're still really structuring this agenda to where it may flow and make more sense and it's easier to talk through, but I wanted to throw that out to you all to say, is there anything that you all would like to discuss with the council during this retreat focusing on the housing authority? Anything that we missed, anything that we think we probably shouldn't talk about? So now the floor is yours.
Go ahead, Arlene.
You probably covered this a little bit, but I guess my question is, does the city have data on what is really critical right now as far as housing goes? Is it seniors or is it families? What are we looking at here?
So we do, and that's in the, and I'll ask Kathy and Karen to join in with the housing needs assessment review. I think one of the things I can tell you that we've seen is, at least in terms of the portfolio for the housing authority to compare what we need, we think we're probably where we need to be in terms of housing for older adults, and we need to start focusing on family housing as part of the housing authority portfolio. And that's, I think I mentioned it in here. And then obviously supportive services housing. The thing on the supportive services side, so then it becomes more than just about the amount of units that we have and do we have enough for a community, but it also then ties into what can we support as a community, because they not only utilize services of the housing authority, they utilize services from our nonprofit community, public safety, and those types of things. And so there's other variables that come into that world. But I would say my gut was, what I would tell you is we probably need more affordable family housing. Karen?
So, so Kathy might want to jump in, but when we complete the consolidated plan for HUD every 5 years, part of that process is to conduct a comprehensive assessment of housing and human service needs. So we did just complete that in 2020. So I don't know whether that would be helpful. Obviously, we'll provide that document as part of the packet that we put together for council. And I don't know whether, it sounds like it might be helpful if we, sent the advisory board members a copy of that information, and so that you can have a chance to look at that and review that. So let's see, we're still in April, right? So clearly we will lose track of time. So clearly June will be the earliest that we will have the council retreat. So it also could give you an opportunity to review that data, and we could have this discussion in more depth during the May advisory board meeting. So Kathy, I don't know if you have anything else you'd add.
I don't. That's what I was going to suggest. That way we would still have time if there are some pockets of things that are missing, that we could do some additional research as well.
I just had one thing, and I don't know if I heard it or not. It would just be like the discussion with the partners that we do have, like the mental health partners, like the number of units that they would have. I think that would just be kind of going along lines with our property discussion as well.
Okay. Are you talking about the vouchers that they get from the state in terms of the project-based vouchers?
Yeah.
Okay.
Because we have units set aside specifically for them, right?
Correct.
Yep.
And that's
Yep. Right.
suites.
Any further discussion, questions? Oh, go ahead, Karen.
So, yeah, so not a question, but I think in essence, what Harold outlined is that, so we'll talk about the current housing needs. We will talk or current and projected housing needs. And then, what is it that the housing authority does now to address those needs? And then it's really that conversation about what would be the goals going forward. So as we understand the ongoing needs that we will have for housing. So it would be great. And again, this doesn't have to be the last time we talk about this, but if, how do you, is there additional information, anything else that you think would be really helpful for us to bring to that council retreat to help in that discussion really about setting goals going forward?
Okay.
So anything else that comes to mind?
So how about we do this? If anybody has goals now, we could discuss it now. Else, what we could do is put something on the agenda for our May meeting, and we could discuss our goals. That would give us time before the retreat, and we could kind of have something on the table at that point. Go ahead, Laura.
I was curious, do we have an inventory of affordable housing for purchase? I mean, does the City of Longmont have properties, kind of like the City of Boulder's affordable housing program, where you can purchase and own an affordable housing unit that stays in the program, kind of like Thistle? That I know Thistle has some units in Longmont in houses.
Yeah,
The City of
so we
Longmont
have
Housing Authority.
So we have some at Blue Vista that's under construction right now, or completed. They have a total of 26. They've sold 11 through 2020. So that leaves 15-ish that was left. And I think they've been consistently selling 2 to 3 per month out there. We have a turnover of the units that are still in our inclusionary housing program the first time. I think there's about 20 to 30 homes still left in that program that can choose. So those units can choose to either get out of the program and sell at market, or they can choose to stay in and sell to another buyer. We've had some go both ways. And then so far under the inclusionary housing program to date, other than Blue Vista, we haven't received any for sale on-site units other than through Habitat through Habitat for Humanity. Those units aren't built yet. There's a total of about 20 that are to be coming up over the next probably 3 to 4 to 5 years. But Habitat has also been consistently building at about the rate, I'd say 2 to 3 a year, just on their own by infill lots and that kind of thing. So,
Yeah, it'd be nice to know, have some more information about those units. And I'm curious why people are allowed to opt out of the program. It seems like we'd want to keep houses locked in
that was
forever,
council,
like the City of Boulder's program.
Well, when they repealed the inclusionary housing program, that was the caveat for the units that were in at that period of time. So
I think it'd be worth discussing a different track for the future if we start building more affordable housing.
Yeah, we're totally on a different track. Yeah, unless it gets repealed again, council can do that.
Yeah, I just think that if the mission is really to provide permanently affordable housing, you shouldn't be able to opt out of it. So
the other thing I was thinking.
So to clarify on that, we were on a path, council opted out of it, or they killed it, they let them opt out of it. We're now back on a path and they're in it. They did set some parameters depending on market. So we're sort of back where we were, but there was a chunk of time where we lost between the two where they were able to opt out.
Okay. Yeah, because I think that's a really, I think that's something we should focus on and talk next month about, you know, a plan for housing for families, not just apartments or condos, but maybe some townhomes, something with a yard. Because I know when my husband and I were looking to transition out of affordable housing in the city of Boulder, our only options were condos, and we were looking to expand our family and needed more space. So I think that would be something worth looking at, maybe like a mixed units, you know.
So as a point of clarification, are you suggesting that's an LHA goal or that's an overall citywide goal?
I think it's an LHA goal, but it's in line with the city's goal of providing affordable housing for the community.
Okay, I just want to point out LHA has never done for sale housing. So if that's a direction you want to go, I would think long and hard about that, because that's a big shift.
Okay.
Go ahead, Arlene.
On the veterans housing that is being put together, is that something that we are involved in, or is that not?
LHA is not involved in that. It came in through the voluntary alternative agreement via the inclusionary housing model. So the city is involved in that as part of that agreement. Now, we think that there's on the other side, we are looking at leasing the office space to them so that they can utilize it and we can serve the same mission. So we talked to you all about that. So you're involved on that side. I will say that as you look at the growth of the program and you look at how it operates, we're going to be working with each other from an operational perspective, because as they potentially have opportunities to house unhoused individuals, there may be a flow through properties that makes sense as they're working with their clients to move towards self-sufficiency. And that's what you see in Kansas City. So they'll come in, they'll work with them, they'll move them into an affordable housing. And then now they're actually seeing them move into market rate housing based on how they're working them through their system. So there's a slight connection.
Any other further discussion on 4A at all? So I think what we'll do is we'll kind of come up with our goals. So it's kind of your homework assignment, and we'll discuss a little bit further in our May meeting. So let's move on to 4B, the audit update.
Was that Kendra?
So right now, most of the properties have been completed except for Aspen Meadows Senior Apartments. They're still working on finalizing that one. We did receive some findings for the Hearthstone and the Lodge, and we're working through the corrective actions for that. A lot of them you've seen before. I don't know how much. I don't know if you guys have seen all the audits before. I don't know what the background is on that. So part of it is separation of duties, lack of segregation. We also had an audit finding because when the city came in, we didn't realize that it wasn't in their monthly process to pay the reserves. So we received a finding on that because the Hearthstone and the Lodge hadn't been putting money into the reserve accounts. And with the cash flow, with that being so rent restricted, it was tough for us to get payments in by the end of the year, by the time we found out. The other one, we did have some eligibility, which we've had in the past, which is just they weren't able to find documents in the files that were signed. So we're working on the corrective actions. We do have a plan. And I think we have, because we're going to have 3 in accounting, and we're also going to try to have backups on the city side of accounting so that we can have, if somebody's designated to print checks, then somebody from the city will step in to print checks that week if that person's out. So that's kind of what we're kind of looking at, so that it's not me. And that's where the problem comes, is like, we can have the separation with the 3, but once one goes on vacation, one of us has to be the backup. So we are working on that. We're also looking at being able to do file reviews. So having community managers from different properties come in and do file reviews so that we can pass those. One of the things was that they couldn't find a checklist in the file. So we should have a checklist, especially for the 202 properties, that basically say, we have everything for these 202s that HUD requires. And so they couldn't find those in the files. There wasn't that checklist. HUD has a checklist that Andrea's working on and creating, so we can start having those in the file, along with maybe having the other community managers step in and review each other's files, so we have that documentation for when audits come down and they get reviewed. We are working on the LHDC audit right now. That's in full force. And then the LHA audit is planned for May 17th. That's when that one will start. So that's kind of where we stand. No, I can send all those audits. I don't know if that's something that's normally done in a particular board meeting where you get to look at all of them, or if this is something that once I get the final ones, I send them to you. If you can give me some background, that would be great.
Yeah, I think once we'll do like we do with the council, once we get it finalized and it's all in, then we'll present to the board.
Okay.
One of the things I did want to touch on with Kendra, so I've been seeing these as they're coming through. She has to approve them and I have to approve them. The biggest challenge, just to go in terms of some of the findings, like segregation of duties, Tom, I know Tom mentioned this last time, you all mentioned it when we sort of started coming in to the meetings. If you will remember, we didn't start hiring the positions because we had to understand our financial capability first. And so we didn't start hiring and creating all the accounting positions until late 2020. And so obviously this audit is for that year. So we've already began taking the corrective actions, but it won't show up until next year's audit because we're not bringing those people into play. We didn't bring those individuals into play. We didn't get Lisa in until the beginning of this year and the other property managers. So many of those items, like you'll see that the corrective action is we're really underway in doing this. Same with the segregation of duties. What I can tell you is it's at the end of 2020, it was much better than it was at the beginning of 2020, because not only did we have Kendra in, we had Susie in, and we had Deanne in. So we had 3 different people working in the finances, but it just wasn't fully developed and built out. So that's why that's continuing. But we know that, as Kendra indicated, for 2021, we have our 3. And then when someone's on vacation, we'll just pull someone in from the city's accounting side to make sure that stays in play. The other key piece that Lisa talked about yesterday, and if you have questions, I'll let you go to Lisa, is Lisa actually has each one of the property managers auditing the files of the other properties. So Corinne will audit Andrea's, Andrea will audit Corinne's, and so we're mixing it up. So we also have another set of eyes on that, and Lisa's overseeing all of that work. So I'm pretty happy with where they're moving and what we need to do. But again, we're still going to catch audit findings from 2020, because if you look at the timing, I think we started the conversations in April or May, but we really didn't fully get into this until June when Jillian left. And even then, we were still utilizing the same processes. So that's why there were things in there, because they were doing it this way. We didn't catch it until much later. And we're continuing to clear up all of those issues. Did I misstate anything, Kendra?
Just a point of clarification. Is this our financial audit or a HUD audit?
Financial audit.
Financial audit. That's what I was assuming. Okay. And then, so I just kind of had 2 points. What I'd like to see is just in that corrective action plan is just calling out, hey, we've already covered this, or maybe even put a date in that we've instituted a policy change in, and this has been corrected. I think that's really what we would be after. Yes, we had findings because we didn't have the manpower, or we didn't have policies and procedures in place. And then the other question I did have, do we have documented policies and procedures, or is that still kind of a work in process? How?
For what?
Well, basically, I guess some of this would be the segregation duties would be on the check disbursements.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
We're working on that right now. We have a lot of them in place, but we're
And it's probably,
continuing to refine.
Yeah, it's probably changing as you work through it as well, as you're getting stuff fine tuned in that.
Kathy?
I was just going to say, we've been standardizing a lot of processes and updating a lot of policies and procedures. So that's like at least one a week, if not more, that we're kind of churning out. And financial ones are going to the LHAAB board, and internal organizational kind of ones, Harold has the ability to review and approve. So.
Yeah, and that's what the auditors are really going to be after. And if you follow your policies and procedures, you're not going to have any findings. So, yeah.
Right. That's it.
Yep.
And then also in the segregation of duties, what I didn't mention is you also have Deanne and Jim Golden coming in and helping as we look at things and start working through various issues. And so, for example, the best example is as we look at balance sheets and how we do it, they're there supporting Kendra in this, because Kendra technically works for Deanne and Jim. So you also have the city CFO coming in when needed. Kendra's doing a fabulous job. But he comes in on a limited basis, but both Deanne and Jim are there to support her when we need it.
That's great. It's basically having like an external CFO, right? That you on call.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right, any further discussion on this? All right, let's go on to 4C, the VCA update.
So I am happy to report everything that needed to be submitted to HUD has been submitted, as far as policies, proof that we have disseminated those to residents. We've got packets for new applicants. We've got some of the policies and procedures up on the website. So that was all due April 15th, and we got that all completed. The only thing left to do, it's still a big lift, is the analysis of all of our properties for accessibility, designing a plan to address those, and then determining with HUD how we're going to do that. We've already started to work on getting additional UFAS, the special ADA accessibility units that we need and don't have through some various partnerships. So one of the deals that we're working on with on the Chrisman 2 project, they're going to double the amount of UFAS units in that property, which we will then eventually have ownership of. So that will count for some of those units that we know we're going to be missing when we do that analysis and audit. So we're already thinking ahead on how we can get some additional units. And then as we go through, as our properties age and we go through and do another re-syndication rehab like we did for Aspen Meadows Apartments, Village Place is next. And then I think Aspen Meadows Neighborhoods after that will also be including in that additional UFAS units in those renovations and rehabs wherever we can. So starting to think ahead, but we don't have the plan, we don't have the analysis of that. That's the next lift that we need to start working on, which will happen probably next month. We'll start putting together and getting out an RFP for an architect to go around and analyze the properties. But half of it's done, about half.
That's good news.
And obviously that piece got delayed because of COVID and being in people's units. And so when we did get the extensions there that we needed to because of that.
Any questions or discussion? All right, let's go on to 5A, City Report, Update on Operations.
Lisa, is that you?
So vacancy, age, receivables report.
Or is it Kendra?
I can definitely speak to the aged receivables report. I wanted to do something different this month and kind of give you a snapshot of what you received last month and what you're receiving this month. So you can kind of see the fluctuations and the differences. The community managers have started working on the ledgers. I've been working with them. They have to send the documentation to me on their findings of what they're finding in the file so that I can upload that documentation when I do the corrections. A lot of what we're seeing is Yardi just wasn't doing the lease charges correctly and they weren't getting them corrected in the system. So what was happening is you may have been overcharging on the HAP side and undercharging on the tenant rent or vice versa. So in a sense, it's a zero net effect. It's just on the wrong ledgers. And when it's on the wrong ledgers, it creates these anomalies such as the suspense column. The suspense column is specifically related to HAP, basically that you've received HAP money that you don't have a charge for, so you really should probably send this HAP back. And that was probably not the case. We just had the wrong charges on the wrong ledgers. So it's moving those charges to the right ledgers and seeing what the anomalies are for the tenants. You know, were they short paying this entire time and why, and going through those. So same thing with the prepayments. If the charges aren't listed on the tenant's ledger, it's looking like they're prepaying all these funds, and they're not. It's just a ledger swap. So we are working through those. It's going to be a long process because it takes a long, I mean, a lot of these have to go back to 2018 because that's when they started. So they're having to review all the way back to 2018, find the recertifications, what were they? We're having to reach out to the HAP subsidy agencies because we may not have a certification in the file because we're seeing that they've actually taken money back and we don't know why. So there's a lot of work involved, but it has started and you can kind of see some of it is going down. So we're getting there.
So question on this, Kendra, is this like the suspense and prepayment, should some of that necessarily been recognized as revenue then? Are we shorten the revenue side or?
It could be.
Okay.
So if they were charging less rent, so let's say they charged $1,000, but they really should have been charging $1,200, we could not have been recognizing revenue correctly. So yeah, that is.
Because the way I see it, this is money that we received that we haven't matched against anything, right?
Correct.
Okay.
And a lot of the prepayments could be the tenant owed more and they were paying more because they received their certification letter. So they were actually paying the correct rent. But in Yardy, we weren't charging the correct rent. We were charging that rent on the HAP subsidy side, which was creating this suspense and then also creating a prepay on the tenant ledger. So just swapping those and matching them up removes them from the ledger.
Yeah. Okay. And then one other question too that I had was just on the prepayments. Are we expecting to see prepayments normally? Do we collect, I mean, the
No.
deposit, would the deposit show in there or any sort of like last month's rent? We would expect that to be zero?
The deposit shouldn't show up on there because that gets put in a separate holding account.
Right.
So that shouldn't show up there. And no, I mean, we shouldn't see prepayments on these. I mean, these are low income housing. A lot of them aren't prepaying. I know there was maybe one that might have been prepaying at the suites. So I think also at the community manager level, we don't want that liability either. So if they are prepaying, you know, the community managers need to reach out and say, hey, you don't owe us, you know, you need to reduce your rent check so that we don't have this big liability at the end to pay them out. We're not a savings account, basically, for them to hold their money on.
Then did you want to talk about the lodge and what happened there?
Yeah, so the lot, you gotta love HUD. So we received a 14% increase in our vouchers for the 202 properties. The way HUD works is they create a threshold. And so what happened is when we did the gross rent change to increase those contract rents, we weren't able to get them done at the end of the year because we didn't have the contracts in time. When you do these 202 properties, you actually create the voucher for the future month. So that voucher was already created on December 8th for January. So what happened on the lodge, and it happened on the Hearthstone as well, is when we went to do the gross rent change, it goes back to January and it tries to correct what should have happened on those ledgers as well and get that HAP money back in. Well, that put it over the threshold for HUD. And so they denied the voucher. And so I have to work through this process on how to correct it in the system and get it uploaded so that they'll approve it. It's kind of, as Lisa has found out, HUD sends you on this little circle path a lot. I've had to do, so they first rejected it, then they sent me to the program manager. Now they said it's ineligible, and they basically said, here's the instructions on how to correct it. So I'm working through that. They don't give much guidance, but I think even Yardy will probably give me more help than the Yardy support will give me more help than HUD has. So we'll get there. So February's lodge payment was denied. It's going to get paid. We just have to work through the processes. And then for the Hearthstone, it was their April payment because it took a while. We had 2 contract rent changes. They gave us an amount. I went back and said, we can't even pay the reserves. And the program manager realized they left the reserves out of the rent calculation. So they had to up the rent again. So we'll see the same anomaly happening on the Hearthstone for their April voucher.
So I just want to add, because of this issue and the audit that we went through, just got our report back on the audit for Hearthstone and Lodge. We are exploring all options to get out of the 202 program. There is an avenue that HUD provides to do that. The level of minutia that HUD gets into on these projects is so ridiculous. It's just mind-boggling. I haven't seen HUD this bad in a project for years and years and years and years, if ever. And they're usually pretty bad. So we are starting to explore how do we get convert these projects. What they do is they convert them to all being project-based. vouchers. So then you have the control and you operate them just like you would any other property that has project-based vouchers. So we are moving on that as quickly as we can. I think there's a wait list to get on that conversion. So we're trying to explore what all that means and how long that might take. But that's a direction that we really feel we need to go. So we'll keep you apprised.
If we did switch it over to the project-based vouchers, would we see a decrease in money coming from HUD at all? Or is it going to be about the same?
It would be the same. From what our consultant said is that basically your contract rent, so whatever your contract rent is today, it would move over to the project-based vouchers, and that would be your contract-based rent as well. But what you don't have to do is you don't have to go through this budget process of where you're spending your money and give them all the details, and your money doesn't apply to the HUD handbook, which is pretty extensive on all the regulations that you actually have to follow.
What we're also saying is we never want to do another 202 property if we're developing it.
That was going to be one of my goals, though.
I've lost the agenda.
Age receivables, I think it was next.
So I did the age receivables. I think the vacancy report. Lisa, did you want to report out on that one?
Anything else on that one?
So on the vacancies, we're making progress. Really been pushing the managers and the assistants to get these units rented. So Spring Creek is fully rented. Village Place, I think as of last night, she had her two that were not rented as well. The Lodge at Hearthstone's fully rented. So we have moving scheduled starting today all the way through May 5th that will fill up all these properties again, finally. Let's see. And the suites, the LHAAB units have been rented. They have a briefing today for the second unit. We're just waiting for MHP to fill their units, which they are struggling going through DOH because they have to pull 20 names at a time and then make sure that those 20 qualify, but some of them, they've had changes and stuff that make them ineligible for the suites. So it's been a process. We're slowly getting through those. And Aspen Meadows Senior, now that it's been a little bit of a struggle to rent those vacancies just with all the construction going on. People want to see the units. It's hard to have them walking under scaffolding around the construction crews. There's not a lot of parking, but I'm optimistic as we're moving forward that we'll be able to get those other units leased once we get back into the office so that we're more available to prospects as well.
Any questions on the vacancy report? All right, let's move on then to 582, the security update.
Is that me? So we have been a couple of things. We have had some issues on security at Village Place, so we've done a few things. First, we have entered into an agreement with Integrity Fire and Security Systems. They're the city's provider. So we're able to tap into that, that contract. They are in the process right now of placing the cameras at various locations within the Village Place common areas. I'm not sure exactly on what the completion date is. I know that when I walked through there before, all the conduit and camera mount locations were almost finalized. The other thing that we did is because we were able to also find out that the back doors on that facility, somebody was able to come in and push the lock. So we used another city contractor and they went ahead and put the plates that they cover it to prevent access in that area. So we know we've stopped the immediate issue, and the cameras will be put in be finalized in the very near future, so that if we have that again, we'll be able to at least have the video we need. Part of what we're doing on this system is it's going to be a cloud-based system. And so as we've worked the remodel for Aspen Meadow Apartments, we're going to put the same system in place there. And we're talking about putting that system in Aspen Meadow neighborhood as well. Where we're really aiming to on some of the security pieces is to integrate this all into one cloud-based system where we would all have access to it, as well as potentially dispatch and maybe some of the officers. So if needed, if there were calls and things, we could go into the system remotely from wherever we are. But it'll be a completely integrated system amongst all the properties. And we're sort of just stepping into this as we have money available to do it. Obviously, we use the replacement fund at Spring Creek to do this just because of the issues that we were having there. But we will just be moving through this as we can for the rest of the properties based on their ability financially to do this. Lisa, did I miss anything on that?
Just a slight correction. We're using Village Place Reserve replacements to do
Village
theirs.
Place, yeah.
And we're looking into doing Spring Creek, getting some
Yeah.
entry cameras in the parking
Yeah.
lot. Also on security, we are working to upgrade some lighting at some of the properties as well through grants with the City Efficiency Works. We sent in proposals yesterday for the Suisse and for Aspen Meadows neighborhood to upgrade their lighting. They walked Briarwood and LHA Main yesterday, and they'll be doing Spring Creek and Fall River Thursday. And so these grants will pay for all of the lighting, and it upgrades them to LED, but provides more luminous lights throughout the parking lots and around the exteriors of the building for the safety of the residents.
All right. Any questions? All right, let's move on to into 5A3 property updates.
I guess I'll take that.
Yeah, and I'll jump in after you.
Okay, so we do have an ad out for the third manager. We haven't received any great resumes, so we're going to keep that ad up, looking for our third property manager to complete the staffing that we need at LHA. In the interim, I've been still filling in here at Spring Creek and Fall River twice a week. We are bringing the after hours emergency system that we've been using at all of the properties, the Always an Answer. We are actually bringing that in-house thanks to the city and following the steps of forestry and parks and rec. So we'll be saving money on all of the properties monthly, and it makes a more one-on-one maintenance, dealing directly with the residents instead of an answering service. And we start that here the first week of May. And as Kendra touched on, our managers have been auditing these ledgers and making it through a couple ledgers a week. It is a timely process, but they're all gung-ho about getting their Yardi systems cleaned up and making just their delinquency reports look really good in the future. So I know Corinne has a goal of having hers done by June or July. Andrea's right on page with that. And I've started working with Brittany here at Spring Creek and Fall River to get those ones done.
Now, a question on that. Are they reviewing every single file or are they just doing a sample?
Every single file, every contract. So if the resident had multiple changes throughout the year, they have to look at every contract and every month to match up to make sure the charges were correct on both the HAAB side or the voucher side, Section 8 side, and on the resident side. So it is a timely process, and some of those can take days in between regular business to look at. And my final update is tomorrow we get the equipment installed at the Hearthstone and the Lodge for the pendant system that will replace the pull cords. So the fire department is looking forward to that one because the residents will have kind of like the alert system instead of just the the alert system works throughout the community in their units throughout the community and in the parking lot instead of just the pull cords in one area of the residence.
Lisa, do you also want to touch on some of the, even though they're reserve replacement, but some of the work that we've done at some of the different properties, as well as, I don't think we've given them an update on the latest suites insurance issue, the water break thing and where that stands?
So yes, the suites, we have completed that construction issue. We're working to get heaters put into the stairwell, so to avoid this problem happening again when we have the low temperatures as well. But the resident who was temporarily living in another unit on site has been moved back into a residence. And we've completed that. We're just pending now the finalization of the insurance claim and a few invoices to close that one out. Reserve replacements, we're working on for Village Place for the cameras, along with a couple appliance replacements going on there. And the next one we're looking at is Spring Creek to do some reserve replacements for their camera system as well as Aspen Meadows neighborhood.
All right, any questions?
Sorry, I'm having horrible allergies today. I have a couple of updates. So one of the things, the parking lot at Aspen Meadows Apartments, that parking lot is still open. One of the issues that we're having is the moisture test keeps coming back high. And so they're working with the engineers to really determine how much material we need to replace in order to get that moisture content where you need it in your subsurface so that you can then begin the paving. Obviously, the weather we've been having recently is not helping matters in terms of the moisture content. So it looks like there was reserves available to do this. And so that's what they're working on. We were starting to, based on where we were moving and the amount of money we had, look at other options. But this parking lot's going to continue to be a challenge for us. Just wanted you all to know. But
So is that going to eat up the contingencies that we had planned on with Aspen Meadows partially? Yeah. Okay.
no, yeah. The other thing we're working on, and this is really tied to some of the ARPA funds and the digital divide world in terms of Aspen Meadows neighborhood. You all may know that we are also connected to via next slide, the school district on $1 million grant that they had. When I started looking at the coverage area, this area for Aspen Meadows neighborhood was in it. A few weeks ago, Lisa and I did a walk around with next slide looking at what we can do for camera placement in that area, but also started talking about internet access. And so I have asked them for a bulk agreement for Aspen Meadows neighborhood to provide internet service there. We actually were able to get them into the units, and they have a really good comms room. So they're looking at, instead of the way they've been connecting the units when asked, moving into the comms room to essentially light up the entire unit. So they have really hardwired access throughout the unit in addition to Wi-Fi. So we'll be working on that. I'm kind of looking at some of the ARPA funds or CARES funds that we have available to front that digital divide piece. And then we will have to eventually be able to, over time, absorb that within the rent. But I think if we give ourselves three to 5 years, that we can do that because the ARPA funds are one time. So, but that's at the neighborhood.
All right. Seeing no hands, let's go on to number 6, other business.
So on other business, a couple of things that we wanted to update you on, and we've been working on this. So you heard Kathy mention the Chrisman 2 project. Wanted to touch on that one a little bit. So what happened there is recently we heard that MGL, who was a developer of Chrisman 1, was actually interested in development of Chrisman 2. It appears that last year, or within the last year and a half, they approached the Housing Authority with interest in doing the second phase. We're not sure what happened, but apparently the decision was not to move forward with that project. We have engaged in conversations with them based on just the opportunities that exist today. And so we have been negotiating with them over the last couple of months on what Chrisman 2 would look like. As you all may remember, the Housing Authority had an option on Chrisman 1 to come in for $100, correct, Kathy? And essentially take over the facility and begin the management on this. Again, not really sure what happened when this first deal was there. I think there was a situation when they used CDBG DR funds instead of the original financing model that impacted their bottom line. So as we began discussions on Chrisman 2, what we've essentially negotiated is a later date to come in and officially take the properties. So, but it will be not only Chrisman 1, it'll be Chrisman 2. And so that looks like it'll be at the end of 2027. We have the ability to come in and manage the properties at an earlier date once they, what's the word, Kathy?
Reach stabilization.
Reach
Once
stabilization.
Christmas 2 reaches stabilization.
And so once Chrisman 2 reaches stabilization, even though we're going to 2027, which helps in terms of the ongoing dollars, but what we also negotiated in this is that we adjusted the revenue split on Chrisman 1 because we know we would be losing money if we came in 2023 as the management arm. But we also know the world we're in now and what we're trying to stabilize. So for Chrisman 1, until we take the properties over, we've shifted the revenue split from, I believe it was 60-40, was that the original? Or
50-50.
50-50. We will now, and we're going to hopefully finalize this afternoon, we will now get 75% of the net revenues and they'll get 25% of the net revenues, which will add an additional 203,000 coming in to the housing authority over that time, which in all would be 611,000. And then obviously when we move into Chrisman 2, I believe there's some development fees in that as well that will come into play. So that's what we're negotiating with them right now. We will need to come in with potentially somewhere between, and we've got to talk to LHDC about this, and we've got to call a meeting for them, but we will, and when we say we, meaning LHDC, the city, and LHA, will need to come in with anywhere from 500 to 1,000 to $1 million. So what you can see though is when you look at the money we're pulling out of it, the return is actually really, really good in a narrow period of time. What we get out of it is 49 sub 50% AMI units, and we get 9 30% AMI units. And so this is a little bit different because what we also heard from CHAFA is in terms of what the work that they do, what they're also seeing is an oversaturation of 60% AMI units. And so what we did here is a little bit different in that it's an income averaging. And with the income averaging, you bring in 70 and 80% units. But what it does is it actually gives you more sub 50% units than you would if you looked at the 60% AMI threshold that we've typically been looking at. And so it's a slightly different deal. We're getting more 50% below units. We're getting the FASA unit. So that's what Kathy talked about earlier, that we need to make up for the system. And we're adding an additional $200,000 of revenue coming in through this process. So we think it's a pretty good deal for the housing authority. And then knowing that we have the ability to assume management once stabilization is reached, and that really works with us in terms of what we're trying to do now, because the other project that's in the hopper, and these are probably all going to be in construction around the same time, is the Element project at the Suites, which is Sunset Heights, which is a fully supported project, which we are supposed to be the managers of. And so we're moving through all of those processes now. And that's why the delay also worked on the Chrisman side. Chrisman is going through the 4% tax credit for the non-competitive.
No tax credits. It would be all private activity bonds.
Okay. Well, what's the 4%, the non-competitive that they're talking about?
It's just non-competitive, period.
All right. So they're going through the non-competitive world. Element is going through the tax
9%.
credit, 9% in approval. And so we've had some issues we've needed to work through with DOH, but we think as of last Friday, we're in a pretty good spot on that one. So Element's responding to them, and we should hopefully hear in the near future. So we're going to be in development on 2 fairly significant adds to our affordable housing product in our community. Here's where the world also changes. As we look at our ARPA funds, right now I'm asking the organization to look at needs, but we also know we have a rare opportunity that I'm going to talk to council about, in that we have $15 million that we're still waiting on the Treasury guidance that could potentially be used in the development of affordable housing. You don't have that much money coming in. And so we could theoretically then be in a position, if we can utilize the ARPA funds, and if council agrees with that from a policy perspective, that we would then want to start looking at the property that is north of, west of the Lodge in Hearthstone that LHTC owns. LHTC, correct? Yeah, they own that one. As a development project, but again, kind of talking about what we said earlier, the need for affordable family housing. Looking at something like that, but really looking at some of those ARPA funds for potentially being the seed money in this. And this is where everything, I think this is where the relationship actually really works, and we're seeing things we didn't see. But how do we use these opportunities to increase the revenue stream for the housing authority? So one of the things you all may have heard us talking about, and I'm just planting the seed in your mind to start thinking about this, and we're going to do the same thing with the council, hopefully in the near future, or no later than the retreat. What we're really seeing in this world of affordable housing and public-private partnership is the ability to generate a large amount of revenue and really stagger how we're coming in on the management side of this. And the more that we can use things like ARPA funding, inclusionary housing funding to do this work, the easier it becomes. And so something that, as we look at these projects, that I'm starting to noodle around is actually the First and Main Transit Station. So if we can bring some of this money in to do mixed use development with affordable housing in it, we now all of a sudden benefit a lot of things, but we're tied in there. And then if you can look at it and leverage it with a public-private partnership model, then you can get even more housing in this. And so I wanted to use Chrisman and Element as an example of how we're starting to shift our thought process a little bit in terms of what makes the most sense long-term for the housing authority in being partners in these projects, and what we can really get out of it, because it does bring in many cases, a revenue stream for very little work outside of the front end of this, knowing that you'll assume a heavy lift down the road, which I think times better with where we are operationally. Kathy, did I miss anything?
No, I just would add that there's other additional opportunities with the ARPA funding, that some funds are going to the home consortium, which is like triple our normal allocation. So we're going to be meeting tomorrow, or folks are going to be meeting tomorrow about how to pipeline some projects for that. Those have to be used to assist homeless, those at risk of homelessness, victims of domestic violence, those kind of things. But that's something that some of the projects we already have in the works could maybe use funding for. Element's going to need some additional funding. So that might align with those goals. And then the housing authority is going to be getting hopefully some vouchers. We're still not, we'll hear by May 10th how much and what, but that is a 10-year funding source for vouchers, again, really to help homeless, at-risk homeless, domestic violence, those really high-risk populations. So there's a lot of opportunities that are coming with the ARPA funding that we need to really make sure we are all aligned and have plans for everything and can hit the ground running as soon as we get the word and we start to get regulations and stuff like that to make sure everything's aligned and ready to go.
right, it's all very good news. Any questions, comments from anybody? One thing I wanted to ask too was, could we get a budget to actual comparison at our monthly meetings? Is that something that could be worked up, or balance sheet and income statement type thing?
Absolutely.
Okay.
It's been a process of getting the budgets uploaded, but they
Oh,
are
okay.
they are almost done.
All right. I didn't know what that process was like. So yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So yeah, we should absolutely. You want to see both the income statement and the balance sheet,
That would be preferred. Yes.
detailed or summarized?
This point, let's do both summary and detailed at this point, and then we can kind of see what sort of information we would like.
Okay.
All right. Is there anything else from anybody? It's like a shorter meeting this time. Yes, Arlene.
So this is going to be sort of a comment and possibly a question. I had the wonderful opportunity of being the first car in line at the 21st Railroad stop when the train went through the other day. And of course, it blew its horn. That is extremely loud. And now, Harold, I know you probably know more about this than I do, but I've tried to stay on top of following up on what's going on with that train horn. And I know that the city has received $4 million towards quiet zones. And I know that there is a list in process right now that puts into effect when those quiet zones are going to possibly be placed. 17th and some of the ones downtown closer to Columbine Elementary are looking at this year. Next year, they're looking at the rest of the downtown areas by the schools, and also 21st. I'm just wondering, if I were somebody that were looking at Aspen Meadows, either the senior or the apartments over there, and I happened to be looking at a time when the train went through and that horn was going, because this morning at 6 o'clock, it was almost constant from 17th to 66. Is that a detriment? And if it is, can we let people know that something's going to be done about this within a year or two?
Yeah, we can definitely let them know the timing on this. I'm trying to pull up the website so we can see, so I can give that to you all, but we'll provide you the information on the timing of the project. But yeah, we can let them know, what's coming and how we're moving through the quiet zone process via the grants. If they have a question, we can get that information to Lisa on this. What's interesting is, and I'm going to talk more globally about what I'm hearing just generally in the housing market right now, is based on the demand, we're actually not seeing that people are having issues with that, at least in terms of them coming into the marketplace. What we're just seeing, the updates we're getting from the realtor community is people are still paying a lot of money to buy houses adjacent to the railroad. So in terms of market impact, probably not seeing that, but we can definitely let them know. Kathy?
I just would add that, that's one of the factors that HUD considers when we put any kind of HUD funding into projects, which both Aspen Meadows Apartments and Aspen Meadows Neighborhood had in it. So there are noise mitigating measures that we did take in the development of those, with high efficiency windows, and it was far enough back from the I know it doesn't seem like it, but from HUD's perspective, it was far enough back from the tracks to mitigate that. Aspen Meadows Apartments more so than Aspen Meadows Neighborhood, but there have been some noise mitigating factors that have been taken into consideration in the design of both of those buildings as well to help mitigate the noises. Oh, baby.
Yeah.
And in terms of the length of the train, yeah, that's a different issue. And we've been having conversations with them in terms of public safety responses and things like that, but it's the railroad. But yeah, hopefully we're done in 2 years, which is better than we thought, better place than we thought we were going to be a year ago. And so with the grant money we've had coming in, we're actually excited to get started on all this work.
Yes, Jean.
Yeah. If I may, go back to item 4A when we were talking about concerns for the city council retreat. Harold, I think in March, you did a presentation to the LHA board where you envisioned LHA Housing Authority being a leader, something that other housing authorities would want to emulate. And I would like to see your vision next month on how you perceive that and what needs to be done to accomplish that. Because we do need to, we do have some requirements, which, you know, Kathy and Karen and I, you know, we have some absolute requirements, but then we should have some room to become the kind of housing authority that we want to be. And I would like to have your input on that at the next board meeting.
Okay.
Okay.
And just to, to answer that question, so I'm going to come into kind of the background of what, for my training, is the politics administration dichotomy as well.
Yeah.
And so it really is the council that sets the policy with you all advising them.
Mhm.
And so at least coming into this conversation, I'm going to really want to hear from you all in terms of what you want to see. And,
Okay.
and it may make more sense to do it this way. We hear from you all as an advisory board, and then as the council in the retreat, and with you all joining them. And then I'm able to take that feedback from what you all want to see to then say, this is then how we move to that next step. So if we could flip the order on it, that makes more sense than what we're doing, because I don't want to set policy in this.
All right.
I want to hear what you all want to see and do,
Mhm.
and then I want to formulate what we think we need to do to be at that next level based on your advice to the council,
Mhm.
housing authority board, and their decision on where they want to go from a policy perspective.
And
That's
and
okay.
we can set that out. And it isn't something that needs to be done tomorrow. You know, we're looking at 3-5 years that
Right.
we could achieve. Yeah. Okay. I have no problem with that.
Okay. And I think we can help set the agenda next week to kind of get you at some of those points with best practices and things like that too.
Good. Good.
Yeah, so if everybody could come ready for May to really just discuss what we see in the next 3 to 5 years in terms of the Longmont Housing Authority, what we would like to see. So then we could give that to the city, and then we'll talk about that during the city council retreat with the Longmont Housing Authority Advisory Board. Any other comments, questions?
I did
Yes.
forget one thing. We are going to be moving offices in the very near future. So we bring them in to the Civic Center with us. So we bring staff. We've been talking to them about this. We'll obviously have the agreement with BCP for the facility. We think it's important, and that you've heard me say this, and we had a conversation yesterday in terms of segregation of duties, all of these things, but then more importantly, just continuing to integrate the housing authority staff into the culture of the organization and kind of how we operate and how we work. We need to get that move done, because it's really hard on Karen and Kathy and Tracy and Kendra and everybody else who are back and forth. But more importantly, I think the sooner we can bring them into the fold with us, we can more quickly continue this culture shift that we've really been working on. And I say that because if you would have asked me last May, would we be in April going into May talking about 2 development projects, potentially a third, and just where we were sitting as an organization, I think I would have laughed. Everyone has done a phenomenal job in terms of moving through this process and doing what we need to do. And to just be able to have this conversation today about Chrisman, Element, development in the future, we're probably 6 to 9 months ahead of where I thought we were going to be in doing this. And so they've been doing a lot of work, a lot of phenomenal work. But we just need to take these next steps.
All right, it's all exciting. These are new projects. Love it. Anything else? Otherwise, do I hear a motion to adjourn?
You move to adjourn.
Do I have a second? A second from Arlene. So next meeting is scheduled for May 18th. I'll see you guys all then. Have a wonderful day shoveling your snow.
Yeah.